creates questions the human mind cannot answer. Out of reach, past all we can see, hear, and touch, beyond all we understand, lies the extraordinary. The extraordinary is the ghost of a man which has appeared to his family and friends.
So he walked past us, and I said, "Hi, Dad," and he didn't reply or didn't say anything, and no hi back. And I said hi again, and he didn't answer me. He walked past us, and he was very concentrated on what he was doing. I thought to myself, that's odd. So I thought I'd follow him and greet him inside. When he walked into the front door, he opened it and closed it behind him. And I opened the door, and when I opened it, he wasn't there. So I said to my mother, which she was cooking at the time, where's Dad? And she said, at work. And I said, no, he's not. He should be somewhere at home because he just walked past me. And she says, no, your father's he's at work.
Trouble is, the man is still alive. It is the strikingly clear premonition of danger that plagued the dreams of this woman. She saw a child falling.
And I dreamt of her falling down a grating. I could see the bars in front of me on the ground. I could see her very clearly slip down through the grating, and I stretched out to get her and felt just wet cardboard, and I woke up in a sweat and a panic.
Then it happened, and she was helpless, just as in the dream.
132 is 17,424. Yes? How about another three-digit number? 284 will give you 80,656. Ooh, you're fast. Let's try one more three-digit number. Go ahead. That's 283,024.
It is the apparent superhuman power of this man to work out the most complex sums and mind-numbing calculations in his head.
This guy is sensational. He's one of the best professors I've ever had. I've had a few other good ones here, but this guy is just incredible.
The human supercomputer. The extraordinary is the speeding motorist cautioned by a man on the side of the road. The driver slowed down and avoided disaster.
If he hadn't seen the figure, he would have, travelling at 110 kilometres, going over the last rise, he would have most definitely ploughed into the accident itself and most likely killed himself and innocent bystanders.
The Good Samaritan had saved his life, but later, the driver would learn that the man who warned him had in fact just been killed. Just some of the stories that lie beyond our normal understanding. Tonight on The Extraordinary.
That chilling story a little later. Good evening. I'm Warwick Moss. Ghost stories usually are about the dead. They concern spirits that have not passed over to the other side. Restless spirits that linger here on earth. But there's a man who has appeared as a ghost to his family and close friends, whose story is hard to ignore. You see, this man, this ghost, is very much alive.
The story of the living ghost begins in Lima, Peru. Maria is 7 years old, and it's an exciting day for her. She's just won a medal for her schoolwork, and she can't wait to show it to her favourite uncle, Uncle Louis. As Maria approaches her grandparents' home, she sees her uncle in the distance. Or does she?
He opened the door into the garden of my grandparents and went inside and closed the door. So I walked in and I immediately ran into the kitchen as I usually do, but this time instead of saying hello, grandmother, I said, hello, Uncle Louis. And there was no Uncle Louis there in the kitchen. So my grandmother says, well, he hasn't arrived yet, dear. And I says, but I just saw him come in.
Years later, in a beachside suburb of Sydney, Australia, Another child has an alarmingly similar experience. The boy is Ladi Mauer. It's a winter's afternoon, the height of the football season. He and a friend are practicing in the garden of Ladi's house at DY.
And we were playing out in the front yard, and I saw my dad coming up the street, coming home from work, and I said to myself, you know, my dad's coming home early. So he walked past us, and I said, "Hi, Dad," and he didn't reply or didn't say anything, and he no hi back. And I said hi again, and he didn't answer me. He walked past us, and he was very concentrated on what he was doing. I thought to myself, that's odd. So I thought I'd follow him and greet him inside. When he walked into the front door, he opened it and closed it behind him. And I opened the door, and when I opened it, he wasn't there.
12-year-old Ladi was astonished and just a little hurt. Why had his father snubbed him, and where was he? He searched the house, but failed to find an answer to either question. There was no sign of his father, even though he'd appeared so clearly just minutes before.
So I said to my mother, which she was cooking at the time, where's Dad? And she said, at work. And I said, no, he's not. He should be somewhere at home because he just walked past me. And she says, no, your he's at work.
The Uncle Louis in Lima, Peru, and the father in Sydney, Australia, were one and the same person, Louis Mauer. At first, you might think that 7-year-old Maria and 12-year-old Ladi saw his ghost, even though the sightings were years apart. But no. You see, Louis Mauer was very much alive then, and he's very much alive now.
Well, if somebody phoned and said that they just saw me wandering into the house, I'd say, all right, that's my wandering ghost. But it's not me.
Louis Mauer is now an Australian citizen, but he spent much of his youth and early married life in Peru. Both he and his son Ladi cannot explain how he can seem to be in two places at once. But somehow it's happened. Time and time again. Dad's ghost, as the family jokingly call this weird phenomenon.
I saw him walk past me, and you know, it was probably from here to you, and he walked past me and he opened that door and he closed it in front of me. You know, so I did see him.
Maria is now also living in Australia, but in Canberra, where she practices as a psychologist. Since those days back in Peru, there's been a close bond between her and her Uncle Louis. In fact, she calls him her second father. But not even that bond can provide her with a clue to what happened that day when she was a little girl of 7.
They told me that probably I had seen somebody else. And I started to get a little confused, though I thought always I had seen him, because there's no one else that would look like my Uncle Louis in all of Lima. You know, he had a unique way of walking, a unique posture, and his style, his looks are quite unique.
And that wasn't the only time her uncle appeared, apparently in absentia. Some years after the first experience, she was going to see her uncle and his wife at their home.
As I was turning in, I could see my Uncle Louis walking and going into the house. And I came close, and I thought if I rush, I'll surprise him and I'll get him before he enters the door. So I crossed the street and I rushed, but by that time he just went in, so I was a little slow. And as he went in, he closed the door behind him, so I immediately went in. The door was unlocked, because most of the times in those times we left the doors unlocked in our country. And but he wasn't there. Actually, there was no one there except the servants and the children. And the servants told me that my Uncle Louis and my Auntie Teddy had gone out for dinner. They weren't at home. They had left about an hour before.
Louis Mauer knows of at least 5 cases where he's made these mysterious visits to his family, even though he was nowhere near the location at the time. On one occasion, his mother witnessed the event, and at the time, she was convinced that Louis was dead. that his ghost had come to say farewell.
She saw me open the gate, go into the garden, and instead of going towards her and towards our usual entry that was on the side of the house, I went up the veranda and around the other side of the house towards the dining room doors. So she said, you know, there's something has happened to him that he won't see me or won't talk to me. So she chased after me, got to the doors to the dining room. They were closed or locked. So then she went around into the house and looking for me and couldn't find me. So then she thought I was dead. She started crying, and 15 minutes later I arrived, and well, they explained what had happened to. And I had been driving during that time, so I don't know what I was thinking. I must have been concentrating on my driving.
Then there was the time, also in Peru, when his wife was startled to hear noises coming from his study. In those days, Louis was a ham radio operator. But that day, his wife was certain he was at work.
She heard me starting to, you know, clicking the switches on and getting my transmitter ready to transmit, and heard me clear my throat and then tapping Morse code. So she went downstairs thinking, you know, that's odd. He's come into the house. This was in the middle of the day and hasn't said hello to me. She could see into the room and I wasn't there. So then, well, she didn't phone me then because she knew it was one of these ghostly appearances of mine. But I can clear my throat. But nobody have ever heard me speak and say a word.
And while we were talking to Louis and his family, he suddenly remembered another appearance, one that happened years ago. However, this time he had no idea that the visit had occurred, a visit to Peru, while he was definitely in Australia.
I got a letter recently from a stepmother, and one of the things she says is that my father saw me at the foot of his bed a day before he died. Well, that was around 12 years ago. I was here and he was there in Peru. So it was quite a long traveling for my ghost.
A ghost? But Louis Mauer is very much alive. A twin? Well, Louis says there isn't one. What then is the explanation? How can one man be in two places at once, sometimes continents apart?
I wish somebody could explain them to me because it's snowballing. I should have an alibi for every minute of my life because if they see me in the murder scene, I'm going to be in trouble.
Danger are unsettling. The warnings are not often clear. The message at times confused, obscure. So when the warnings turn out to be real, we don't often have time to react, to take the steps to avoid disaster. Luckily, in this story, fate stepped in to save a life.
I was convinced that I'd foreseen what had happened, and I'm not sure how I knew it was going to happen, but I knew.
What Jean Watson saw still astounds her. As a school teacher, she's used to explaining things in practical terms. But there's one event in her own life that defies explanation. It was a dream, a vision that came to her early one morning in 1988. The dream featured a 3-year-old girl. It was in black and white, perhaps a little blurry around the edges, like an old movie, just slightly out of focus. The girl's face was familiar, someone Jean Watson recognised immediately. A child called Sally Ann, the daughter of one of her colleagues at school.
And I dreamt of her falling down a grating. I could see the bars in front of me on the ground. I could see her very clearly slip down through the grating, and I stretched out to get her and felt just wet cardboard, and I woke up in a sweat and a panic.
2 hours later, when she arrived at school, Jean Watson was still disturbed. Even more so when she saw that Sally Ann was there that day. She'd been brought in by her father, who was looking after her till his classes began.
And I just said to him, I said, will you take care of Sally Ann? I've just had a very, very vivid dream of her falling down a grating. And it was so strong, and it was so surprising that I saw him a couple of hours later. And I told a few others as well. The whole incident was alive and immediate.
She started to tell me about the dream that she'd had, you know, about Sally Ann. And it was all I remember talking about a grate. I don't know, you know, it's just a word that came to mind, but she was just telling me about the story and had a little bit of a chuckle, so I thought, oh yeah, you know, that's not going to happen.
But it was, and school clerk Barbara Jones would play a vital role in the drama about to unfold. By now, it was around 11:30 a.m. Sally Ann was still at the school. Jean Watson was working in the staff room, trying to concentrate on her work, trying to erase the dream from her mind.
The teacher next to me, a man, stood up, looked out of the window and said, "My God, that girl's going to fall from the veranda." And I didn't really do anything. I just sat there, looked up at him. I couldn't see the veranda from where I was. And I assumed that one of our girls was standing on the veranda railing or leaning over or doing something silly. It was a senior school, so I thought it was one of our year 11 or 12 girls. I joined the man at the window and looked across, and I was horrified when I saw that it was little Sally Ann. It wasn't one of the students. And she was being held in the arms of one of the clerks and being comforted. And I said, "What happened?" And he said, "She seemed to fall down between the rails of the veranda, and if Barbara, the clerk, hadn't acted quickly and grabbed her by the foot, she'd have crashed to her death on the concrete playground 2 stories below."
The clerk was Barbara Jones, who'd heard Jean's premonition only a few hours earlier, who'd scoffed that dreams couldn't come true. This one did, and Barbara Jones was the heroine of the day. She was the one who rescued little Sally Ann.
She didn't scream or anything like we would if it happened to us, but she started to cry when she couldn't get up. Like, you know, when I grabbed her jumper, she actually grabbed hold of my arm, you know, and held on, and I just pulled her through.
By chance, Barbara Jones had glanced from her office and noticed Sally Ann playing on the veranda, perilously close to the edge. Then she'd slipped.
When she went backwards, like it happened, I could literally, in my mind, see her on the ground. And then I realised that she hadn't gone, like the little foot was stuck, you know, and I just made a dive. And I kept seeing this little picture of her on the ground, you know, and thinking how far it is. I knew it was such a long way, and especially upside down as she was. She was literally hanging upside down, you know. It was just frightening.
It took Barbara a long time to recover from that experience, even though little Sally Ann was safe, thanks to her swift action. Even now, she wonders about that near tragedy and Jean Watson's dream. The dream that was so precise and went so close to predicting the fate of little Sally Ann.
I went cold. I felt strange. I felt a little bit frightened because I was convinced that I had foretold that incident. I was convinced my dream had come true, It wasn't exactly the same, it wasn't a grating. I wasn't involved and I didn't grab at soggy cardboard. But it was the same little girl, and it was a railing, and she had fallen through it, and if somebody hadn't been there, I'm pretty sure she would have been either fatally injured or seriously injured anyway.
Since the beginning, Hollywood celebrities have been very good to us on this show. We don't plug their movies and rarely get around to talking with them about their art or their talent. We simply ask them if anything extraordinary has happened in their lives that they'd like to tell us about. And that is how we came by this story.
Take a mirror. Any kind of mirror will do. Place it against a black background in a darkened room. Light a candle and position it so that all reflection in the room is blocked out and you are only looking into the mirror's blank, dark reflection. Gaze into it for a while. You might get to talk with and see the ghost of a departed friend or loved one. Before we dismiss this idea, we should know that the mirror trick is an essential part of experimentation being done by a lot of scientifically minded people, including this man.
Powerfully affected and changed.
Dr. Raymond Moody is regarded as the world's leading authority on the paranormal and afterlife experiences. His books include Life After Life, which sold 10 million, and Reunions, visionary encounters with departed loved ones. But it's not until you meet the man that you appreciate Dr. Moody is not just a theorist and writer. He's a practicing communicator with the dead, and that is where the mirror comes in. We heard about it while visiting one of Dr. Moody's weekend seminars in Delray Beach, Florida. Dr. Moody, in turn, learned about the mirror trick from the ancient Greeks.
It would be quite possible, I thought, to replicate at least one part of the near-death experience, namely the part in which people seem to see relatives or friends of theirs who have passed on, by a method which was well known in the ancient world, of evocation of the departed, or evocation of spirits, which was practiced among other places at a wonderful institution called the Oracle of the Dead at Ephora, which was in the far northwest corner of Greece, a huge underground complex with corridors and passageways and dormitory rooms where people would stay, all opening out into a 50-foot-long central apparition hallway in which the archaeologists found the remnants of an enormous bronze cauldron. They were highly polishing the inside of this big cauldron, filling it up with water, and there in the complete darkness underground, lit only by the flickering flames, no doubt, of lamps, would cast a diffuse illumination. That would have made quite a spectacular mirror. And so I surmised that the apparitions were being seen by mirror gazing in the surface of that water.
Long before he heard about the Greeks, Dr. Moody had been experimenting with spirit evocation using mirrors.
When we gaze into an optical clear depth, which is the experience that you have when you're looking into a mirror when there are no reflections, but you're just seeing off into an infinite distance, or when you gaze into a clear pond and where there's no debris in the water and no reflections and no distracting objects in the water. Or, as we see in the cartoons, in a crystal ball, that we can see images of a certain very extraordinary kind. Images not like the mental imagery that we see, which seems to have no particular location in space when we try to visualize something, but no, really quite vivid, three-dimensional images, typically very beautifully colored, which seem to move across or through the optical clear depth. And it's not too surprising, I think, that our ancestors in remote times, in prehistoric times and so on, would have decided that this was a paranormal phenomenon and that what was happening was that they were seeing into the spirit realm. Quite a number of creative figures, painters and poets and novelists and so on, have used this technique of mirror gazing to get their creative inspiration for stories or to devise inventions, as Thomas Edison did. And so I created an apparition chamber in my own research facility by putting a mirror on the wall and surrounding it by a black velvet curtain to exclude reflections, putting a very comfortable chair in there below the mirror and with a light behind it, so that the subjects gazing upward into the mirror would not see any reflections, but would simply be seeing off into an infinite distance, as it were. And to my surprise, it worked a lot better than I had anticipated. Found very quickly that about 50 to 70% of the subjects under those conditions do, in fact, have quite extraordinary experiences. One very typical thing that occurs is that they say they see the apparition forming off in the distance, like at a distance in the mirror, but it comes forward and actually emerges from the mirror into the cubicle where they are. It stands or sits right in front of them, full color, quite dimensional, full size, and in 30% of the cases it's quite audible. The subjects actually report hearing the voice of the deceased person. One of the most common things people tell you who are bereaved is, if I only had 5 more minutes. And that's what these encounters typically are, saying those things that were left unsaid and patching up the relationship, smoothing over those rough spots, saying goodbye, saying I love you, and that kind of
thing. This story will chill you. It's about a man driving along a dark and lonely highway. At the side of the road, a person waving at him, warning him to slow down. Topping the very next hill, the driver came across a fatal car smash and would have added to the carnage if he hadn't slowed. Days later, he saw a picture of the man killed in the smash. It was the same man who waved him down.
A country road in Victoria, early on a Sunday, May the 12th, 1991. A young man driving home after visiting friends. What happened next still haunts him, an experience he still can't talk about publicly. In fact, he's only ever told a handful of relatives and his close friend Bruce Harrower, who recounted this remarkable story.
There was a look of terror that came over his face as he was describing it, and yeah, I just have no doubts at all that what he saw, he did see.
To help maintain his anonymity, we'll call the driver Tom. He was a local. He knew the road well. But that morning, he did something uncharacteristically foolish.
He was, wanting home to bed. He was very tired at this stage. He put the foot down. He was doing 110 kilometres an hour. The road was only a 60-kilometre zone.
As he sped along, something at the side of the road attracted his attention. Tom glanced out the window of the car and literally could not believe his eyes.
He saw this vision off to the side in the medium strip, and as he glanced at it, he saw what appeared to be a figure, a ghost, a spirit. And the strange thing was, he saw the lamppost directly behind it, through it in fact, and he just couldn't believe what he'd seen. He virtually sort of rubbed his eyes and didn't know whether it was reality or what, just his imagination.
Maybe it was the shock of seeing the vision. Maybe good sense prevailed, but immediately Tom slowed down. Then he turned back to take a second, closer look at the figure he thought he'd seen.
Where he saw the figure the first time, he really had a good look this second time, and sure enough, it was there again. A figure, a spirit.
Confused and dazed, Tom headed once again for home, this time at a much safer speed. As he crested a hill, he suddenly noticed flashing lights up ahead. As he drew closer, he realised it was a road accident, and a very bad one at that. Probably fatal. 2 crumpled vehicles. No sign of survivors. Police were still waiting for the ambulance to arrive, and not surprisingly, they waved Tom on his way.
So without further delay, Tom went on his way and headed home. He didn't get much sleep that night at all. Just his mind was just spinning with the accident. He just couldn't believe it.
For days, the accident played on Tom's mind. So much so that he didn't give the vision he'd seen a second thought. It would come flooding back, though, when he finally received that week's local newspaper. The lead story was a fatal car crash, and inside was a photograph of one of the victims.
Immediately after he glanced at the picture, something was telling his mind that, you know, you've seen this man before somewhere, but at the time he couldn't work out where. His mind was telling him that it was like a puzzle that he was just forced to work out. So he had a good look at the photograph, and he realised where he'd seen this man before. It was actually the figure that he had seen waving him down.
But how could that be? The more Tom thought about it, the more convinced he became that he understood the events of that early morning. He had seen a ghost.
He was precisely heading along the road at 1:15, and that was when he saw the figure. Now, the newspaper states that the man who died, Brian Johnson, died at about 1 o'clock, which would mean that Tom saw the figure 15 minutes after he had died. So this just shocked him even more. He couldn't handle it at this stage, basically.
Tom and his friend Bruce Harrower are also convinced the vision was a warning on a tragic day that probably saved his life.
Tom believes that if he hadn't seen the figure, he would have, travelling at 110 kilometres, going over the last rise, he would have most definitely ploughed into the accident itself and most likely killed himself and innocent bystanders.
For someone like me who can't keep his checkbook straight or add without the help of my fingers and toes, this story is way beyond anything I can understand.
I don't call myself a human calculator. It does sound a little degrading. I prefer to call myself a mathemagician. Would somebody get us started by giving us a 2-digit number? How about a 2-digit number? 35, and another 2-digit number. Multiply 35 times 42. Make sure you get 1,470, or your calculators aren't working. Are all of your calculators working? 1,470, 1,470. Good.
Just when you thought computers were taking over your life, here's a man that can beat any computer, any time. The mathemagician is Arthur Benjamin.
Really is a skill much like a talented musician or a juggler or a typist. Just I've practiced something that very few people have, so it looks much more impressive than I think it really is.
Well, his students at Harvey Mudd College in California are impressed, and they are all majoring in mathematics.
Call out 16 digits, 1 digit at a time. I will try and hold on to these numbers. 5.
9.
9.
3.
Okay.
1. 4. 8. 2.
And
0.
okay.
4.
Okay.
9.
Mm-hmm.
7. 1. 1. 8.
And
4. 5.
okay. 5, 9, 3, 1, 4, 8, 2, 0, 4, 9, 7, 1, 1, 8, 4, 5. Okay.
This is just incredible. I mean, this guy is sensational. He's one of the best professors I've ever had. I've had a few other good ones here, but this guy is just incredible.
Benjamin's students think his ability is incredible, but what did his teachers think when he was a student?
I remember once, it must have been second grade, our teacher once said something like, there don't exist any numbers that were smaller than 0. And I asked, well, what about negative numbers? And she practically threw me out of the classroom. Said, you're not supposed to know that for another 3 years or so.
But 3 years later, Arthur's problems had not ended, nor had his ability to amaze.
I remember one day when the teacher left an answer on the board as 108 squared, and I, being the shy, bashful child that I was not, said that, oh, well, that's easy, that's just 11,664. And she looked at me and she said, that's right, how did you do that? And I showed her my method, and she had never seen it before.
At college, the same thing. They had never seen a talent like his. In fact, his professor spent the next 4 years studying him.
2-digit number.
69.
69, another 2-digit number.
74.
Multiply those two together, make sure you get 5,106, or the calculator's not working.
Yep, you got it.
I think a lot of people, most people, have the potential to do the types of problems that I'm doing. It's just a matter of having the incentive to do it. How about another 3-digit number? 727 is 528,529. Yes. Another 3-digit number.
890.
892 is 795,664. I'm on a roll. If I'm driving down the road and I get a little bit bored, I might multiply the license plates of the cars in front of me or something, but usually I can turn it off if I want to.
But Arthur plans to continue putting his amazing ability to good use.
I'd like to bring mathematics to the masses, to make arithmetic and mathematics a lot more fun than it's being done and being viewed today. Let's try another one. I'm just getting warmed up. Another 3-digit number. 132 is 17,424. Yes? How about another 3-digit number? 284 will give you 80,656. Ooh, you're fast. Let's try one more 3-digit number. Go ahead. 532. That's 283,024. Have to beat you on that.
Punishment and death. An old world prison where justice was found at the end of the hangman's noose.
The hangman would have visited the prisoner in the cell, and that's to measure their strength of their neck and to weigh them to make sure that the length of the rope was the right length so that they were hanged correctly. If the rope was too long, then the head would come away from the body when the hanging was done. And if the rope was too short, then the person would be strangled rather than hanged. And hanging was breaking the neck. It was like that.
Many sad souls faced the executioner. Some say The spirits of the dead still walk the corridors of Melbourne's historic jail.
We have a tour guide here called Bob. He's been with us for about 5 years, and he was starting his tour up on the stairs back there. And somebody asked him straight off the top, said, "Oh, are there any ghosts here?" And he said, "Oh no," he said, "nothing that we've experienced." And at that time, there's a cell just sort of directly to the side of him while he was doing his tour, and the light flashed off, on, off, on, and that was just the one light. Now we found that there was nothing wrong with the globe, and for that to happen, for it to be a circuit failure or anything like that, had to happen to all these cells on this side, as they're all on the same electricity circuit.
An untold story, next time.
The Ghosts of Melbourne Jail, next time. Also next time, the story of a man who jumped out of a plane. His parachute failed, and he fell thousands of meters to the ground. He walked away without a scratch. For now, good night. See you in the future.
I started thinking some really weird things now, you know, like I couldn't do anything. I was really mad because I had this feeling like here I am, perfectly okay. You know, I was talking to myself and I tried everything I could, and I could look down, I could see the ground, and I kept thinking, I'm okay now, but when I hit that, I'm going to die. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking, you know, like, it's just not right, you know, it's just not fair.